who uploaded how much data when, and who didn't upload data. And then I used to go see them one-to-one. I think we had 36 people. I used to meet them one-to-one and tell them, please just make sure that you keep the device running and so on. The same scenario happened with the IEPI. With the IEPI, the sensor that we started using for compliance was the battery. And the reason that we use battery, Kevin talked about it yesterday as well, is one of the most reliable sensors that it really doesn't depend on whether you are seeing a satellite, you are not seeing a satellite, you are indoor, outdoor, doesn't depend on anything. And it's guaranteed that every phone has it. So it's guaranteed that every phone has a battery, so you definitely can get a battery record for every phone. So, and there is nothing that really can affect the number of data that you can get. So it's the most consistent sensor. That's why we use it to calculate all these compliance rates here. So basically we say from 5 p.m. yesterday up to now, we expected to see, say, 100 different battery records, 100 battery records in a row. And we only got like 10. So we assume that's 10% compliance. And the rest, probably the system for some reason was not working. And the same last data update here basically calculated this based on that. We checked when was the last time that user uploaded any sort of data. This is not only battery, basically any sort of data down to an hour. So it doesn't calculate the minutes. So when was the last time that user uploaded any sort of data, GPS, battery, Wi-Fi, anything, then we just include it there. And but this is very oops, I think I clicked on something wrong. Okay. This is very high level report. If you want a more detailed compliance report, you can go here. If you click on the compliance tab page, you can select one of the names. I'm going to select my name. Make sure how much data I already have uploaded.
Again, if they were to log in, by virtue of being a study administrator,
yes,
they would see this interface for their study.
Yes.
And then they could select compliance from that menu.
Exactly. Yeah. So because right now all of you are are set to be the study administrator, although I logged in this morning, so I have no data here. Because you all are study administrators, so you can all see this as well. So you can just click on different users and see how much data they uploaded. Like, for example, for this, we see that we got 64 records at 11 p.m., 40 records at midnight, and so on. And so it plots the graph. So for some reason, after 3 a.m., we didn't get anything for ambient temperature and for all the other sensors as well. I'm just going to show how it will look like for a study that actually was running for a long time. Like, this is a study that I was running with me and some of my friends for, I think, 3 months. So if I can launch it. I think it's still working, but maybe it's because the connection is. Oh, yes. Yeah, I had it already loaded here, but
I see. Yeah, it's still waiting. Okay. There it is.
Okay. Compliance. So this experiment was running. Okay, I think now it plots it again. So this experiment was running from end of October to end of October 2014 to end of February, and you can see like it just plots the time versus the number of records that you have received at that, and you can see that how much data how much data for each of those sensors you have received. You can see, for example, for GPS, battery, Bluetooth, accelerometer, and so on. I have been pretty persistent in to collect the data. But like if I go with someone who has collected less data, you can see, for example, this person doesn't have much GPS for almost the first 2 months of the study, right? So basically, we know that they did upload data, but not GPS as much, and battery. These are quite helpful if you actually want to make, during the course of the study, you want to monitor the data throughput and see how much data you get and from what sensors. And if one of them is actually like is not working as you expect. For example, for a participant, you get data for battery, but GPS and Wi-Fi or Bluetooth is always 0. Then you can know that probably they always keep their Bluetooth off, or maybe their GPS. I think in one of the cases we noticed that the GPS sensor of one of the phones was broken, so we got literally 0 GPS records for that. And I also talked that GPS and battery is a very stable sensor. But if you look at here, even for, okay, I'm gonna go here. Even for battery, it's not really like just, if it was a very consistent sensor, you had to get 12 records every hour, because well, we have 12 5-minute intervals every hour, right? But you can see that sometimes we get 5, 10, 10 again, 12, and so on, sometimes up to 20 and more or less. That's why the compliance is an approximation of the actual compliance that users have. We can't really calculate it like very accurately, because it's really hard to do any calculation. We are thinking about a way to calculate compliance for other sensors as well, not necessarily just battery, but well, so far not much progress on that. But I think overall, if a person has like compliance should have like an error rate of like 4 or 5%. So we are usually don't care if they are 80 or 85. We just want to make sure they are not below 50 or like 0. So
Mohammed, that initial screen that you showed, which reported a compliance rate as a percentage, you want to talk a little bit about how that's computed?
So this, okay, I not very used to. Yes, if I can come here. So we ask the system, the phone, to execute us every 5 minutes. But because the way that the operating system works, it's not necessarily guaranteed to work every 5 minutes. It works maybe every 3 minutes to anything between 3 minutes to 8 minutes. It executes us once. It runs us once. And so that one time that it runs our code, we are guaranteed to get 1 battery record. If for example, if operating system is going to be a very kind to us and it runs us every 5 minutes as we have asked for, so it should run us 12 times every hour. 12 times every hour, you basically can calculate from the start of the experiment up to this point right now, for example, from 5 p.m. up to right now, which is around 10 a.m., how many hours we have, you multiply it by 12, that's the number of battery data you expect to receive from user. So if you have received, then you basically look at the data that you have received and you see, well, I expected to receive 10 times 12, 10 hours times 12 records every hour. You expected to receive 120 records, but you only look at the data that you have received so far, you have only received 50. So that's approximately like what, 45% of the data that you expected. Then this is the way that we calculate the compliance rate here. But again, as I said, it's not guaranteed that the phone operating system runs us every 5 minutes. It might be every 3 minutes, it might be every 8 minutes, it might be 9 minutes, and so on. So the number really doesn't exactly go to 100%. So if you do run the app on your phone and make sure that you have it always running and always working up to right now, you still won't get 100%. You get something between maybe 90, 95, sometimes even more, maybe like 105%. The reason is that instead of uploading 120 records, the operating system might have run us like more than 12 times, maybe like 13 times, 14 times, and then so we got 13 records instead of 12. So that's how this can go basically above 100% or below that. That's where this 5% error rate comes from. And the last data uploaded basically we keep track of every data that people upload, like any sort of data, and write it the last one. When was the last data that's uploaded? And we just show it here. This is not based on battery. This can be based on anything. So if you upload GPS, this again gets updated. That, for example, at 5 p.m. You uploaded some GPS, or at 6 p.m. you uploaded some Wi-Fi data. So we calculate the latest one, and that's the data that we show.
And a couple of remarks on that. First of all, when their phone connects, it does so automatically, so they're not aware of it. So when you say you uploaded, you mean the phone?
The phone uploaded, yeah. Like there is no interaction right now, except the survey. There is no user interaction with the system. So user signs up, it registers in the study, and then study run, assuming that there is no survey. Study runs in the background without any user interaction. User always can see what data is being collected, what sensors, but there is no visualization even offered through the app. So the only way to access the visualization is to go through the website. So for user, there is no involvement.
How about snoozing?
Well, yeah, except snoozing and some configuration when they want to upload the data, how they want to upload the data, and so on. Like, for example, you want to say, oh, upload the data only through Wi-Fi, or upload the data only when I actually plug my phone, and if it's not plugged, don't do that. There are some configurations that user can do. User can snooze the app if they don't want to, and so when they snooze the app, it goes to sleep for 1 hour, and then it comes back up at the end of the hour and starts vibrating for like a second or two, and then continues the operation silently in the background, like always.
Another note that bears mention is that these statistics have changed quite a bit from 20 minutes ago when you first showed them. Specifically, there were a set of people who had smaller numbers earlier, but are now have reported significant amounts of data, and that's a reflection of the fact that their phones have connected in the meantime.
Right? Yes. Yeah. And the other thing is the time zones. So the time zones we calculate, we get the time zones from the phone. So we assume that if this is your personal phone, you probably have the right time zone set. So we just read it and use the time zone everywhere in the system. So for some people, we have CST, which is the central time, which is the correct one. GST is maybe, I'm not sure which time zone is GST. That's why the time zone is a little bit off there. We probably have to go and adjust the time zone for all of them to be CST. Then we see the times properly. That's why you see, like, for example, for some people, the last data uploaded is 7 p.m. today, which if it's GST, whatever GST is, if you calculate it, it should just.
GST is Greenwich Mean Standard. So
how many hours ahead?
I think so.
But should be less more than that, because if it's 6, you subtract 6 from 19, you get 13. It's 1 p.m. But that's GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, and UTC. Gulf Standard Time, maybe that can be. Yeah, I don't know. Like anyway.
In any case, the point is that the correct time is stored in the system. It's just presenting it.
Yes. So
using an alternative time zone, and that should be changed.
Exactly. The reason is that
you can choose what time zone you want to report with respect to.
You can modify your time. You can modify the time zone, not through the interface. Still, you have to go through the code. You have to go through the database and modify it there. But we will add an interface for that. We needed the time zone in the system. It's always UTC. But when we want to present it, we try to see when, like, what is the time zone for the user. And the reason is that to assume that we want to run a study in, say, East Coast, like in, for example, the study that we want to run in, say, if we want to run a study in New York, right? They have a different time zone than us that are monitoring the study. And we just have to make sure that the data that we are looking at is the correct time zone for the user. So if user leaves the house at 9 a.m., we want to see that at 9 a.m. their time, not 9 a.m. our time, right? Because there's a difference. It might be like 6 a.m. or something our time.
Right. Again, so this is an issue not of whether the specific time has been recorded correctly. It's an issue of how it's displayed through the interface.
Exactly, yes.
In a way that will lend domain insight and clarity on the part of the administrator.
Yes.
As to the significance of the pattern.
Yes, yes. And time zone overall is...
Daniel?
Sure.
So when I look at the compliance rate, like, okay, I understand all the concept, but I have trouble understanding how there can be so much variability. Like, if I look at Cheryl, for example, who's like the perfect participant,
you'll get an award at the end.
and like some of the other people, like me at 2%.
Don't be upset. That's okay.
But I just don't understand, like, if the phone is on and it's working, shouldn't there be less variability? Like,
Yes. What I see here is that probably for Philip and you, there was a bug in the system that caused the system to silently crash. And because the user doesn't interact with the system, you never notice it, because this is not something that you, like, it's not like your music player in the phone that runs in the background, but as soon as it crashes, you say, oh, the music stopped, so you go see what happened, right? This just sits there and you don't interact with it. So if it crashes, that's the problem, that we see it on the data that your system stopped working, but you have no idea. You have no idea. Oh, it stopped working. You don't know that really.
So I know that that's not the explanation for Philip, because he got a mosquito survey while we were having dinner. So it worked for at least a few hours, so it shouldn't be zero. So that's
So
it may be a connectivity issue with Philip.
yes.
refresh mine. If you refresh, I think I'm up to
If you just did it, it takes around 5 to 10 minutes to refresh it. So because I want to make sure that I see your data, so I give it another 5 minutes before. So I want to see if you can beat Shrel in this. If you go up.
So then the compliance is really like, it's not compliance. It's like the compliance of the app. Is the app working?
Well,
it's not only that. It's not like, are they answering surveys?
Yeah, no, I have some comments on that after
Sure.
Mohammad is talking, but you have to realize when it comes to these compliance measures, there's a set of factors that need to be considered. First of all, the term compliance actually, it sits unsettlingly with me, because it's not, it gives an image of, the degree to which the participant is complying with the guidelines. And it is definitively not that. That's a component of it, but it's a comparatively small component. There's a set of other layered factors that further affect it. Some of those factors are human related. They have to do with the person managing the power on their phone so that, it's keeping it charged at a level that's needed to run the app and to make sure it doesn't shut down. So there is a certain amount of that, but there's also factors that do involve human side that have nothing to do with compliance, like whether they've been in contact recently with the network of choice.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a Wi-Fi network that it's allowed to transport over, has this person been in contact with the Wi-Fi network recently? And it may report, a long time since it received data, but that doesn't mean the data is not collected. It may just be that they're out on the farm, or they are up north, on a canoe trip, and they're not in contact with a network. This is of particular significance for low SES populations, where the connections with Wi-Fi may be a lot less common than for many of the people in the room. So there's that component, but there's additional components as well having to do with sort of the technical underpinnings of IEPI, and the fact that if there is a problem with the phone, like if the GPS sensor dies, which it can, phones sometimes give out, then it will result in a low compliance with respect to that metric, even though it has nothing to do with a fault on the part of the user. So there are these layered issues, and there's additional ones too that I'm even not mentioning. Another one might be snoozing the phone, which they choose to snooze it, and that's perfectly within the guidelines provided, but it may be viewed as not ranking up in terms of high compliance.
Yeah. So as Nate said, like, this only shows the amount of data we have for each of these participants to actually work on. But if there is not enough data, there can be a lot of reasons. There can be technical reasons, there can be user experience reasons, there can be a lot of reasons. Like, for example, I noticed on my own phone, when I was testing the app, I made sure that it's running all the time and so on, but I noticed that the Bluetooth sensor dies after 6 hours. So if you work with Bluetooth for 6 hours, after that it stops working. And this is a limitation of the hardware, so we really can't work around it. So then it's obvious that if I go to my compliance and look at the Bluetooth, it shows that my compliance for Bluetooth data to show the interactions with other people around me is low. So it's not necessarily my fault, because I kept the app running all the time and I made sure that's working, but the hardware just failed on me, right? So there is not much that can be done.
And if I could distinguish a case even further than that, when it comes to GPS, as I had noted, and I think Kevin noted yesterday, if you are indoors in a large building which exhibits limited penetrability as far as GPS signals, you may have a real shortage of GPS data, which again has nothing to do with human compliance. It's just that the signal doesn't reach you, and so the volume of data collected is less. So really, the term compliance here is really, best renamed something to do with sort of, volume of data, relative volume of
Maybe we have to work on the wording of that. And the other thing is that I think we will get a very different result overall if the app is running on people's personal device versus devices that we have provided them. And one of the differentiators here is that whether you actually connect the device to the internet or not, right? If it's your own device, there is a very high chance that you want to use some social networking app or some messaging app, and then you make your phone, connect your phone to the internet, and we use this connectivity to upload the data. But if it's a third party, if it's a phone that's provided by the study, you probably are not going to use it for messaging or any other purposes, right? So very likely, although it might work in the background and collect all the data, but we still don't get any data from that. So
do you want to refresh this now?
Let's hope that we.
In medication, we have in healthcare they do call it adherence.
Triumph. The triumph. Sorry, Jeff.
I'm just saying adherence is more engagement. It's sort of a.
I'm still zero, don't worry.
Compliance, but no, yeah, but very paternalistic and command and control.
So rather than that,
adherence is probably
adherence.
common because you then choose. Yeah, the subject chooses. So they're a subject rather than an object.
Yeah, but even that is because it's not so much. A lot of these are non-elective, right?
Yeah.
They're factors outside of their control.
Yes.
Definitely.
And even that sounds to me a little bit normative.
Yeah, well, it's something I think something more like engagement or that could be engagement of the phone versus engagement of the person.
Yeah, I think to me, I guess after hearing this, it's kind of best viewed as this is an indication that you need to dig deeper and go like, okay, what's going on with their phone?
Yeah.
But then even the highest compliance person, they could still be giving us bad data, or they could still be not completing any of the surveys that we want them to complete, but all of their other senses are working perfectly.
Yeah.
Right? So it's just like, okay, at some level this is like, okay, I need to dig a bit deeper and see what's going on, but even if I have someone who's like at 90%, so they might not be giving me the surveys that I want, and that's sort of maybe a key piece or something.
And I think seeing that both have visualizations that we're going to present a little bit later that start to show the dig deeper. Okay. I know I've got one that shows early diagnostic for participant no longer charging their phone versus phone having issues and dropping out. You can actually see that from visualization back.
Yeah. So one issue on which William back there in the corner has been working, perhaps is working even as we speak, has to do with what you were just saying, Daniel, which is compliance, adherence, engagement, data volume, whatever we call that metric, and I think we have to be very careful about the wording. That may be perfect in the sense of, it delivers all the data expected, but that may mean it may be full of sound and fury and signifying nothing about that participant's actual health status or health behavior, because that phone is sitting in a Wi-Fi rich, environment and not being carried by that participant at all. And Williams back there has and is working on sort of an increasingly set of sophisticated measures to quantify and really allow us to precisely identify, okay, when is that phone on someone's person and when is it off their person, which is a key metric for looking at whether the data confers any value, right? Because if it's sitting on a desk somewhere and that person is out, that person may be out running a marathon and we'll never know about it.
you have a question? Yes.
I was going to ask related to validity and reliability of data. How is this a metric that should be used to discuss that? Because
The compliance?
For me, that's the so what, right? How
for the compliance, to a large extent so far, it helps us as the data collectors, as the data consumers, to basically monitor the progress of the study and see if everything goes as we expected. Of course, if the compliance is like 70 to 80%, 85%, that's no problem. We can say, well, the reasons might be some short battery loss, or like might be short-term battery loss, or might be some system problem like that. For example, phone was not running at the rate that we expected. But if, for example, if it drops to 20%, we can expect to have some problem somewhere, whether it's on the user side, whether it's on our side. For example, when I went back home yesterday, I noticed that there are some issues, right? So I could immediately get to it and start fixing it. So before it gets too late, we have a fix up there for that. So we start with the new process. So it doesn't necessarily help in the data analysis, but definitely I think it's very helpful to make sure that during the course of the experiment, the quality of the data that we receive is what we expect, and there is no massive gap in the data. Yes.
So I've got a pretty low compliance rate by your definition, but I actually answered, like, I took pictures for Catherine, and I did them at the and I was out last night to live outside of town. So does that not get uploaded when I'm back on campus? Because like I'm still super low.
Are you connected to the internet? But we can look at that specific case. But the general point here is that I did look at everyone's data and tried to saw different issues. Quite a few of issues were on the software side, right? For example, I tried to put a module yesterday, a piece yesterday that basically detects when people are passing the bridge, it can release a survey. So there was, we tried to build it on one of the previous modules that we had done, but there was a mismatch in the code that was used that caused the problem. And because I really didn't test it before uploading it, well, that went to all the phones, and then started to, like, quite a few phones started to complain that, oh, this piece is broken, this piece is broken, this piece is broken, right? So I think for some, we have received some data, for some we haven't. We have to go through the details of the data and look at that. The other thing that we get as a data, which is mostly for the technical part, is that the phone reports its operation. That's exactly how it operates. Like, for example, I did log in right now. I started working right now, and 5 minutes later, I started working right now again. 5 minutes later, oh, I did crash because of this reason. Then we can actually go through the data and look at it and say, well, for this particular user, the compliance rate is low, but there, again, on our side, we have a lot of crashes on their phone. So there is a problem on our system and the way that it's been running on their phone. Then it's clear that.
This is a general question. If I live outside, but I'm reading the survey question, I live outside that zone, does it then get incorporated into the survey?
It should, regardless of where you are. Like, you can be outside of the country. And, like, for example, one interesting experiment I've done is that I keep my phone, well, although they keep telling that you have to turn off your phone while flying, I don't do that. And I run the app as well. Quite, like, I think last time that I came to Saskatoon, on the way back, I could clearly see the path that the plane flew from here to Toronto, and I could just see the GPS data. So I didn't have internet connectivity there, but the phone worked, collected the data, and just buffered them. And at the end, it just, when I got home, used my home network to upload the data, and then I could go through that and see exactly the path that I was flying. So it doesn't matter where you are. You can be out of the country, you can be up in the air, you can be anywhere, and it still does the work and connects. And basically, as soon as you get connected to the internet, it uploads.
But let's try to unpack Joe's question a little bit more. So one key issue is that this in no way relies upon connectivity being continuous. If you're out of contact with cell and Wi-Fi networks, the data is still stored on the phone for, I don't know, with our lab version of IFE, it can occur for months at a time. But and that data is is opportunistically uploaded when the connection is secured. But there's a further question, which she was asking is, why is her score so low as shown there? And that score that you were showing for compliance was specific to a certain sensor. Is that right?
Yes, but overall, like you should.
So I mean, there's different compliance scores for different data with your system.
Yes. You can look at the details. We can look at the details. Is this?
And for example, my GPS score may be very low because I spend much of my day in a building where GPS doesn't reach, and it says my compliance is low, but it's something which is not very meaningful as far as my involvement.
So I can clearly see here that we have like about 2 hours of data from your phone on different sensors, which should be more than 0. Maybe there is another problem there. But again, why this is so low compared to the interactions you had since then? That's a very it's a very strong indication of a problem, right? So we can clearly see that and quickly just go through the data and see exactly where is the problem.
Okay. Do you have a record of compliance with or indication of fraction of surveys answered, or is that?
Surveys. This I think surveys should be in one of the streams but you see we got 2 survey counts, none here. Yes, basically we got 2 survey counts that was uploaded at close to midnight.
Okay.
So that's the only data point we have for this graph.
Okay.
Which might not be, there might be some survey that's not uploaded. One of the reasons I brought this graph up, yes.
Did the time zones that screwed this up?
It's unlikely. They just, if it still uploads, it always starts at the right time. But then we wouldn't have anything. These are all hypotheses we can test. We can still probably take as soon as I get to my desk, I'll definitely check that. I'm interested myself too.
If the experiment was scheduled to start in a time zone that we didn't reach until 4 in the morning, then no one would have actually started recording data until 4 in the morning.
Gotcha. I was on evening time.
GST is called standard time. Yeah, GMT is meantime. So somewhere in Dubai.
So why were some of the phones handed out Gulf time?
Probably the phone settings was set because these phones are shipped from they're shipped from Iran. They all have Persian the text on it, so that's why probably.
We'll be here any second.
The percent is.
Some of them were CST and some of them were GST.
We used you were in the other workshop that we were back in June. We used some of these phones for another workshop, and for that I explicitly went to the 10 phones that we used and made sure that the time is correct and the time zone is CST. If you are using one of those phones, your time zone is CST. If you are using a new phone, probably no one has updated them just yet. That's why the time zone for those ones is GST. That's the best explanation I can come up with. The reason I have this graph up, I think someone mentioned about the how we can, this is just the amount of data uploaded. We cannot be sure if this data is really representative of people's behavior or just the phone was sitting on the desk. Nate mentioned that William is working on some more complicated metrics.
Well, let's be clear. We have actually several metrics for that William has previously done, but he's working on some more sophisticated.
So some of those, the only one that's been integrated in this is this graph, and that basically shows the variation of accelerometer data in 3 different axes. So if you do hold your phone on you, regardless of what you are doing, walking, driving, even if it's even if you're just biking or anything else, the accelerometer shows some variations. That it's an open science question to exactly how to match that pattern to different activities. But a simple way to look at it is how these variations is shown. Like this is one graph that shows the variation of accelerometer on 3 axes, and it shows the average and minimum and maximum value at any given moment, at any minute from when is it? From midnight to I think noon of what day? I don't know. I have to look at the date on top. But which day I picked? Okay, yes, this is the date from February 12th to February 14th. And you can see in this period, like I was using the phone a little bit here right now, but again, phone was sitting silent at this period, and so on. This is one of the visualizations I put together quickly just to have some way to look at the accelerometer data to see if the phone is always sitting on the desk or somewhere, and no one really interacts with it, or actually the phone is being used. So if the data that you get is just a solid line without any change, that's one indication that the data that you're getting probably is not very representative. But well,
It's a heuristic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, we'll be talking about more rigorous procedures.
For sure.
Yeah. That should be eventually integrated into it. Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to present?
That's it. I will start looking at Joe's problem, but if there is anything, please.